Hey, I'm Sam, and this is my Loopstation / loop pedal thing I designed and built entirely by myself, and I've been having a ton of fun using it. It broke. With a few caveats.
But why, you might ask? Also, why am I outdoors? What the hell am I doing?
Well, maybe it's because I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment and love to do things that are out of my capabilities and scope of my smooth brain. Oh, and I recently got to see Ed Sheeran play live. I mean, it wasn't a big show. It was kind of like a small venue, maybe like 50,000 people. Yeah, that was cool. And that kind of got me obsessed with looping as a playstyle again. I mean, I went down a rabbit hole of watching countless videos in YouTube, and I ended up being too overconfident off of Instructable and YouTube tutorials, thinking I'm well equipped enough to tackle a project of this size. Probably one of the biggest catalysts for this whole project was seeing Ed's new looper lineup of Loopstations online,
And I can't afford any of them.
I couldn't even afford the little Looper Plus, which kind of hurt my soul knowing I couldn't even get that.
So like any sane man, I decided to go DIY.
My Loopstation / pedalboard thing is based off the Chewy Monster 2 and the Sheeran Looper X, where functionality-wise, it's a 4-track looper with a mode switch that switches between 2 modes, a recording and a playback mode. My design will be a kind of hybrid between the Chewy Monster and some on-the-market loopers / DIY Instructable loopers with similar designs, plus my own personal touch sprinkled on top. Now, believe it or not, this isn't even the first time I'm attempting this Loopstation project. In the great before times of 2019, I attempted a very similar project and made 2 revisions of an all-in-one enclosed Loopstation. And they kind of worked. I was surprised I even pulled it off back then, but they were unreliable. The software and hardware weren't conducive to playing, and the most important reason as to why I look at them as failures and why I stopped was I just didn't enjoy using them.
This is oh god. This is the remnants of that old project. As you can see, pedals, they run to this cable and it's a whole mess. I had this thing working and then I used it like 2 times and stopped.
And that was mainly because it was just too big, too clunky, too cumbersome, and I had no idea what I was doing, and my skills were just not up to par at the time. But I've grown a lot since then, and I've learned a lot since then, so I hope going into this new version of the loop pedal, I'll fare better. Fingers crossed. So you can think of this new project as sort of redemption for those failed projects in the past.
Having a loop station of my own would be pretty damn sick. So that's why I'm building this loop station. Hopefully it will be good. How hard could it be, right? I'm gonna be breaking down these parts, reusing as much as I can, because I don't want to spend too much on this looper at the end of the day. So yeah, let's lay out a game plan.
For this part, I knew I had to get my hardware sorted first before I could even begin to figure out how to get the Loopstation to work the way I wanted. I knew the design I wanted to go with would mean the Loopstation would basically be a big old wedge of cheese with 6 pedals, 3 buttons, and some LEDs. With that in mind, the first part would be breaking down my old Loopstation, salvaging what parts I could, and then moving on to measuring.
This is turning out to be a bit of a mess.
Breaking down the old Loopstation proved a lot harder than I thought because of the shoddy construction.
I have no idea how I actually did it back in the day. I actually did it in an angle, I guess. And this was a terrible design, but also taking apart these is an absolute nightmare because of this freaking spring. It just wants to go everywhere. So I have to keep it extremely straight and close it ever so gently as not to disrupt the spring and sitting in this hole right here. So, fingers crossed, does it go in? Should it go in? That's what she said. Nope. I totally butchered that.
Okay, now would be the part where I plan out the final dimensions and the functionality of the Loopstation. That means a lot of measuring and careful planning. You can see in the time-lapse I am laying out exactly how I want the station to shape up and where I wanted my pedals and buttons to be. Well, roughly, anyway. But more work needed to be done, of course, before I could begin the woodworking part. So after a lot of intense measurements and using advanced and bleeding-edge detailed modeling software and a lot of math and calculations,
I just decided to wing it and hope for the best.
Now, for those of you who don't believe I actually put in the work to cut out the pieces of wood I needed for the project, and for those of you who doubt my woodworking skills, I didn't actually record any of the work I did. So to justify myself, here's a reenactment of that entire process.
Ooh, okay. So, I think I have the bones off the loop pedal built. It took all freaking afternoon just to get to this point. Lots of screws on the top. It doesn't fit. It doesn't actually fit together the best. I think there's a bit of warping and shit. Like, look, I am by no means a woodworker. I think this is a lot better than my first attempt many moons ago. It's a lot more compact. It's a lot more sturdy. Ouch. You can see, like, here there's some wood chip out, but for a hack job, I'd say not too bad. Maybe get some files and sandpaper just to knock down some of these rough edges as well. Yeah, pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with that.
Next stop, wiring.
Ooh. Good morning. It is currently the next day, and I have a terrible case of the bid hair. I'm gonna take this opportunity in the morning to do some wiring. I am by no means an electrical engineer. I don't know much about soldering or wires or how electricity works or how technology works, but I have the Arduino here with me. I'm gonna follow some schematics on my computer, and I'm pretty sure this shot is out of focus. Good job, Sam. I'm gonna crack on with it, and hopefully this to me is the most daunting part of this whole project. I am quite worried because I have no idea how to code. The wiring is one thing, but when I get to the coding, that's gonna be a whole nother ballpark. So we'll see. I'm gonna just press on with this.
It took me a whole day to just get to a point where I thought things were finished.
I am exhausted. It's been, oh my goodness. I started work at this at 10:30 in the morning. It's now 10:43 at night. It's all wired up. Fingers crossed I didn't screw up any of that, and this should just work out the box.
And then they weren't.
Okay, so I ran into an issue. I think I've got a grounding issue, which is frankly kind of pissing me off, and looking at this rat's nest of cables is not helping things at all.
Because it turns out 2 of my pedals were outputting faulty signals, and I had to completely rewire those from the inside. I had to dig inside the shells of those pedals and tap straight into the switch and pull a wire through a hole I had to drill in the shell. It was a whole thing. You had to be there to get it. All this sped up time-lapse footage you see may be just a few seconds long, but in reality it was hours of work stripping and tinning and melting my fingers to heat shrinking and burning my fingers again with the soldering iron, and then mangling my fingers some more, and twisting and cutting, and
I hated this. I hated wiring so goddamn much.
so I was feeling really numb by this point, and I decided I really needed a break. So that night itself, I finished the wiring.
We're done. All the wiring is done, but it's not looking too tidy.
Finally, to cap off that milestone and my evening in general, I went to a super late night screening of Furiosa with my friends, and the movie was delightful.
It's really good.
Anything to numb the pain that I was feeling at that time. Now, up to this point of the video, it seems like it has been a pleasant journey so far to get to this phase of the build, where I have my wooden shell sorted, the brains of the looper are all wired up, and the pedals are in place ready to get coated, and bam! I'll be off to the races and playing in no time. Sure, there had been some hiccups and mild annoyances along the way. They're just minor little hindrances and little problems here and there. Nothing the power of rainbows and friendship couldn't overcome or solve.
But I'm afraid to tell you that was all a lie.
Believe you me, the building and wiring part was the least of my problems. I managed to record around 2 hours worth of footage of me trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and failing to get this damn thing to work. I will spare you the headache and the heartache of watching that director's cut of the whole ordeal, mainly because I'm too lazy to edit it all into a cohesive narrative. But trust me, I ran into so many more problems, from more wiring and grounding issues to buttons and switches just dying for no reason, to LEDs not working. But this time in pink, to problems with Mobius, the looping software I initially intended to build the looper to work with, to then Googling for hours on alternative looping software options, to one last Hail Mary attempt at getting Mobius to work, to then abandoning that idea entirely and going with Ableton as my looping software of choice, to then realizing my Arduino Uno just wasn't going to cut it. Okay, this is just not working, so after much deliberation, I have made the executive decision to give up. Actually, give up using this thing, because this Arduino Uno has been nothing but a pain in my behind. And I'm sorry the mic went out for a bit, but I'm not going to be using the Arduino Uno anymore. There's too many bugs with the MIDI and the Ableton stuff, and it's just been a whole mess. I've decided to switch gears, and I'm going to be using a Teensy instead of the Arduino Uno. It's going to support MIDI much better and hopefully work better with Ableton and all the stuff that I tend to do with it, because the Uno just wasn't working for me. But here we are, and I'm going to push on with the new Teensy board, which this thing is my savior. This should be more reliable than that Uno. Famous last words, I know, but let's do this. Round two. Let's go. Ah! And then I had to go back to rewiring.
Look, it's not pretty, but it works.
And then back to more problems with Ableton, to then more problems with Ableton, and then back to coding the Arduino and failing, to more coding and failing, to more coding and to then trying a billion different variations of codes for loopers for Arduino boards online, to having none of them work as intended. It got to a point where I even wanted to give up and try to buy an off-the-shelf MIDI pedal board from Behringer and see if I could modify it to make it somewhat my own, in a last-ditch attempt to save face and my sanity, because the build wasn't going anywhere, especially with my 0% knowledge on coding. See, even if I did learn how to code, it would take months just to get to a point where I could write something remotely usable for my looper from scratch. And clearly, modifying existing code from other projects online just wasn't going to work. I hit the most major of major roadblocks, ladies and gentlemen. After days and weeks spent fighting and trying, this was it. I had finally lost. But that was until I found the answer to all my coding problems, and as it turned out, it was kind of blatantly obvious. See, the answer came when one day I was showing a buddy of mine the progress I was making on the Loopstation and how I got stuck on the code. And he had the most brilliant suggestion.
Hey, why don't you use ChatGPT?
What? At that point, I was willing to try anything, so in a desperate attempt, I fired up ChatGPT for the first time. And look, I have to preface this by saying, up to that point, I didn't think much of ChatGPT. Like, at all. All I knew was that it was slowly ruining art, taking our jobs, and soon will take over humanity and become our machine overlords. And it's raining outside. I certainly didn't think of it being as powerful as it was at helping out with coding, but it worked. It worked well. Incredibly well. After plugging in my broken mess of a code I had and asking ChatGPT to fix it, it did exactly that. It gave me a working code, which I then uploaded to my looper and got it working. Kinda. It wasn't perfect out the gate, mind you. There were still some gremlins I needed squashing before the code would be exactly how I wanted it to be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was going in the right direction. There were more than a few iterations of this code that ChatGPT cooked up. I went from trying to adapt code that was available online to asking ChatGPT to sketch something up from scratch based on some parameters I fed it. Some of them came out remarkably well with a few slight problems, and sometimes ChatGPT would just absolutely mess it up. But this last one was the right one. I had to be super specific with the parameters and specifications I fed ChatGPT, and my wording had to be spot on to get the code just right. But it was done. I had finally come up with a code that works for me.
ChatGPT came up with a code that worked for me. Also, it's been so long that I had a haircut.
kind of dark, but okay. We made significant progress here. Damn, it's dark. It works! The pedal board works. I can't really demonstrate to you right now because it's unplugged from my Mac, but rest assured she works. I'm going to just gonna tie down some of these cables. Please don't fall down, Mr. Keyboard. It's a complete disaster in here. Buttons not seriously tied down, but it all works pretty damn well with Ableton. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make sure everything's routed properly, and then just tighten everything down, and then we can bring it for a test drive.
Mind you, it isn't perfect, and there were some compromises I had to make to get this thing to work. But the bottom line is the code works, and so does my looper, and the nightmare has ended.
Finally. Oh, so why the hell am I outdoors again?
And now we're in the home stretch. All that was left to do was buttoning everything up, and that was not without a few more complications, and then cleaning my room before finally taking this looper for a quick test drive.
Let's clear out the looper. All right, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Totally didn't butcher that at all, but to be fair, this is my first time trying out my new looper. I guess it turned out okay. Later on, I wrapped the thing in vinyl with some questionable and shoddy workmanship. Okay, here's something I didn't expect to turn out pretty cool, but it actually did turn pretty cool. So I got this forged carbon fiber wrap, and if you can get it to focus, yeah, it turned out pretty good. I mean, like, it's still janky as all but again, it turned out okay.
Alright, and just like that, my pedal board is complete. It's done. I am very happy with it. The wrap didn't come out perfect, but still pretty cool.
And finally, I went on to print out some labels, because what's the point of making something DIY if I don't get to customize it with labels? And yes, I dubbed this loop station Lucy, because I was watching Fallout when I was building this thing, and Fallout is damn good.
And now, a quick demo and explanation on how the looper works before I wrap everything up.
Alright everyone, meet Lucy. This is my completed loop station, and I'm just gonna break down what each button does basically, and how it interfaces. Let me just pull up Ableton real quick. How it interfaces with Ableton. Not that. The loop station is powered by USB-C, and it goes all the way to a USB hub that's behind the laptop into the Mac. This is also connected at USB hub. This is just supplementary. You don't really need one of these, but you can do cool shit with it, as I shall soon demonstrate. The guitar and my microphone feed into this, my universal audio Vault 2. Very good audio interface, sounds incredible. It all works through Ableton. So Ableton has a plugin called the Looper, and I'll link a video where I basically follow the tutorial on how this guy, really talented guy, recreated the Chewy Monster in Ableton using all these loopers and channels. And I can't do it justice explaining, but he does a much better job than I ever could. I'm running out of breath because I have a terrible cold. I sound like shit, and I'm really sorry to everyone hearing my terrible voice, but I really want to get this video done. This project has taken way too long. Even my guitar has gotten tattoos, and yeah, I don't want this video to be held up just because I got a f***ing cold that's lasted for months actually. But anyway, here are the buttons. We have a mode switch, which it's kind of gummy because I messed up the hot glue. Trust me, it works. A clear button. I got my record and play button. This one's overdubbed, and the play button's supposed to be here, but yeah, my OCD wouldn't let me have 3 buttons here and only 1 here, so I did it this way. It looks better. Doesn't make sense, but yeah, this is just purely a stop button. I also had to make some compromises with this because typically when you hit stop on any other loop station, it will reset the track to the start, whereas mine, because I had some issues with Ableton and the code, pressing stop once doesn't bring the playhead to the start. It just stops it right where it is. So when I hit play again, it'll start where that playhead was instead of starting from the start. So I have to hit stop every time I am looping live. It's a small annoyance, but it's something I've learned to live with, so it's fine. I got my 4 tracks here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is also a track if I want it to be, but it's a free button basically. I can map it to be whatever I want since it is a MIDI button. And these tracks are basically whatever I want them to be. It all depends on what I set up Ableton to loop at each given time, but typically this is for guitar, this is for guitar as well, this is for everything, my mic, my guitar, my keyboard, and this one is just for my voice. Now ideally, I would have 2 microphones, one for looping and one for singing, but I do not have enough channels on my audio interface, so I have to make do with what I have. And I think that's basically it. So let's just give you a quick demo on how this thing works. Let me put my camera down. I am running out of breath. I can't talk too much. Shit, this flu is killing me, dude. Anyway, let's do a quick demo. So I play one of my favorite songs from Ed that I think almost everybody knows. It's one of his most famous songs, and I think it's one of the greatest love songs ever made. So let me just show you. Let me see all these buttons moving? So that means I'm just choosing a given track to loop. And I always have to look at my laptop. You can see my head turning, but I always have to look at my laptop to see which channel I'm in, to see the status of the looping channel. So let's start a loop. I'm on channel 1, track 1, sorry. And let's just play it. So now, what I did was I started the loop by pressing this pedal, and to send it to overdub, I just press it again. And if I were to press it again, that sends it into playback mode. So I don't want that. I want it to be overdub. So now it's overdubbing. And now that it's overdubbing, I can add to this. So I can add stuff like kicks and snares. That's how he plays it basically, and then I just send it back to play. And if I want, now it's the time to send it into playback mode. So, okay, gummy button. That's the button that always doesn't work, but apologies for the feed also, by the way. Anyway, so you can hear there's a guitar, there's some kicks and snares, but now that I'm in playback mode, denoted by that blue LED, I can bring in and out tracks from the loop. So if I hit this, that mutes the percussions, and I'm just hearing the guitar. So like this is how basically the whole looper works. It's just muting and not muting tracks, and creating a whole song with it basically. And in your performance, you would bring in and out tracks as you go. So if I didn't want a guitar, I just want kicks and snares. There you go. And we put it all together. Well, I missed that, but you know, you get it. So, oh man, I'm running low on juice. Let's make this count. Okay, so I can stop it, and I had to hit it twice, like I mentioned earlier, because if I were to play it, if I were to stop it, you see, it doesn't start from the beginning, so I have to hit it twice. So that's the one limitation of my looper, but it's something I've managed to work around. So let's start. And I can do this. And that's how it's done, man. That's how App plays it live. And if I hit that, that clears the looper, and we can reset. So let me just show you another one of his most very popular songs, and a song that I think is pretty cool to demo. He even used it in demoing his Looper X, so I think it's pretty appropriate. So, okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. And that basically silences all the other channels. You can see it here. And I can bring in channels as I please. So that's how it works. It's basically just muting and unmuting channels. I recommend you this at home. Loopstation. That's pretty cool. I can hit 2 buttons at once. And I can just have cushions as usual. I mean, just I kind of messed the timing on this a little bit, but it's really hard to do when you're recording and you're playing at the same time. But that's basically how it works, man. That's the Loopstation. Oh, almost dragged the whole thing off the ground. And yeah, kind of butchered my vocals there, but do forgive me. I have a terrible flu, and I really want to get this video out because it's taken way too long. I got really sick this last month, and it's just been holding up making this video, but I don't want to wait any longer. I really want to get this video out, so hope you put up with my terrible voice and this less than ideal performance, but I hope you get the gist of how this works. It's pretty cool, man. And I love this thing. It's so much fun to play with, and it's incredible. So much fun. And I can stop it, and I can bring everything back, and that's how the looper works.
Okay, we're at the end now, I promise. So I've been using Lucy for quite a few months now, actually. I finished the looper all the way back in like May to June, and it's September now. Yikes. So yes, this video took a lot longer than I expected to get out there, mainly due to me being lazy and life getting in the way and my health. But here we are, and here are some of my key takeaways and changes I'd make to a potential Lucy Mark II. For one, the pedals, while they work, are noisy and feel really flimsy, but they work. I'd like to change them ideally for something like these pedals here. And another thing is the LEDs. I'd ideally like to have a few more to denote which mode I'm in more easily. And also my audio interface. I'll probably get one down the line with more inputs. And another thing is I'd like to change the build and the construction. While the build turned out super solid, which was one of my main goals from the start of this build, right from the jump, and it's a lot more solid and a lot more rigid and well built and can take a beating a lot more so than my old attempts. It's still really janky. I like it to be a bit more polished, and that goes for the vinyl wrap as well, not just the build, the whole thing. Basically. Preferably, I'd properly design a new chassis and 3D print all the parts and spray paint it and etc. But that's for the future. And now, money. How much did I sink into this project? Also, a small heads up, I'm gonna be sharing the currency of my build in ringgits because I'm in Malaysia and that's our currency, but I'll also share like a rough translation to freedom bucks for the sake of the video. So here's the price breakdown for my looper. I'm gonna start with the pedals, which was about 10 ringgit a pedal, so that came to about 60 for 6. The extra buttons, that was 20 ringgit. LEDs, resistors, and PCBs, all the electronic gubbins, was like about 30 bucks. Wires, I had some scrap laying around, so I used some of that, but I also had to buy that project wire, and that was about 14 bucks. All this is including shipping, by the way. I bought the Arduino Uno clone all the way back in 2019. That was around 30 bucks, but I can scratch that because I moved to the Teensy 2, which is a lot more expensive at about 47.50. The USB-C extender, I got it for about 19. Vinyl wrap was about 40 bucks for the rolls, but in reality, I only used roughly 10 bucks worth of vinyl. And wood, almost all all of it is recycled and reclaimed wood I had lying around, but I did buy some of the wood I used for the original project back in 2019, and that came to about 20 bucks. A lot of Lucy is made from those old parts, so I'm gonna count that in at 20 bucks. Various hardware, that means screws, paper, whatever, that's about 5 bucks. I'm not gonna factor in tools, work hours, so the total of everything is about 225 ringgit 50 cents, or about 52 bucks 30. So look, on its own, the pedal board functions as intended. It's a pretty sweet MIDI controller, and if I were to compare it to the Behringer FCB 1010, I believe that's the name of MIDI controller pedal I wanted to actually buy, Lucy seems like a way better deal, because the Behringer costs about 609 ringgit, or about 140 US dollars give or take. Here's the tricky part though, Lucy on its own seems to be a really good deal, but it's just a MIDI pedal at the end of the day. I haven't yet factored in the part that makes the Loopstation, well, a Loopstation, my computer. If you saw in some clips, I was using an old Lenovo laptop. That was supposed to be the main computer I use for running Ableton. And look, you could almost 100% get away with using a much cheaper machine, or even a free hand-me-down laptop, which was what I was doing, and run Ableton off of that, like how I initially wanted to. But that old laptop that I was using in the early stages just was way too unreliable, and it just didn't work, and it just started to die halfway through the build. So I resorted to using my daily driver MacBook as my main computer for the Loopstation. So I guess if we're being fair, this looper would be nothing without my laptop, audio interface, and Ableton. And the new final total is 3,795 ringgit, or about 879 bucks. Oof. But you could probably shave all of that price down if you were to use a different looping software instead of Ableton, and you'd be able to get away with using a much cheaper laptop and audio interface. Here's the total price list I would have ended up with if it weren't for those unforeseen circumstances forcing me to change my setup, and ultimately the final price. In comparison, here are some of the prices of other loopers in Malaysia. So if you factor in my audio interface and MacBook Air to drive the actual looping software, plus Ableton itself isn't cheap, then yeah, those prices go way up. And suddenly a Boss RC300 and Headrush board start to seem like pretty good deals, because they're all in one unit and they pretty much have all the logic built into them, and they are hugely convenient. But I want to point out that I built Lucy to my exact spec and my current situation. I already had a laptop which I've been using for years, and I already had Ableton. Plus, my use case is a lot more casual, and I can afford the setup and breakdown time when moving the looper and laptop setup to different locations. I also like the flexibility of being able to use the MIDI controller with any machine. It doesn't necessarily need to be my Mac, and that also means it's more repairable. So while an all-in-one loop station is definitely more convenient, my setup is more flexible, modular, tunable, and expandable. So I don't mind the extra added inconvenience. But here's the shit kicker. Even with my laptop and an Ableton license, the whole setup costs less than the Sheeran Looper X, which was the goal. I wanted to build something that could do at least 90% of what the Sheeran Looper X does. And it does that. Lucy does that, just not as elegantly. But man, do I really want a Sheeran Looper X. I really want one. Maybe that's for the future, down the line, when I'm able to afford one. So I guess all that is to say, I'm still really proud of how Lucy turned out. Elegant, well put together, perfect or not, it's mine. This thing is mine. I built it. And I think that's one of the biggest bonuses of building this thing from scratch. I can boldly claim that I did it. I made it with my two hands, and it's my own, and in some... Oh, I almost broke it. Yikes. Anyway, it's my own, and in some way a weird extension of me. So I'm gonna be using this thing a lot more in the future for sure. I've had so much fun using this, and I'm still having fun using it, and I plan to do a lot with it in the future, so watch this space. So anyway, I've been Sam. I make music, and if you made it this far in the video, I thank you. I guess there's not much more to say than goodbye, God bless, I'll see you soon.